For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
This is Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mists, a metroidvania co-developed by Tokyo-based studios AdGlobe and Livewire, long-awaited follow-up to their highly regarded Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights. You play as Lilac, a young girl with only a single memory to go by, flashes of a woman saving her from someone or something before waking up at the depths of some rank pit surrounded by endless debris. All she knows is that she needs to make her way back to that woman to find out who she is and how she ended up here. It's a compelling setup, one made even more interesting as she comes upon this fallen android who she seemingly has the power to wake up and restore. She too has very little recollection of what transpired, yet recognizes Lilac, and so feels compelled to join in her search for answers. In doing so, she then becomes Lilac's sword, literally. You see, Lilac, in all her innocence and fragility, is capable of very little on her own, but the magic-fueled automatons she heals throughout her journey, one by one, become her combat and traversal repertoire. I'll talk about how they actually function as combat and exploration tools later, but it's how they're used as a storytelling device that immediately gave me pause and think, hold up, these guys are onto something. Things like your attacks, your grapple hook, ground pound, hell, the ability to sprint, these things are just the expected unlocks in a typical Metroidvania, but here are each their own characters, their own personalities, with their own fears and ambitions. They'll each talk to you at rest points. They'll tell you what they know about the world, how they feel about the goings-on, even engage in a bit of friendly banter between one another. Like, my parry ability is attached to this old, disgruntled, battle-worn beast whose best days are behind him, and he regularly chimes in about how he's gonna stick it to the man, all while taking puffs of his magic-fueled cigarette. I mean, isn't that just raw? Most Metroidvanias are rather light on narrative, as they're quite solitary experiences with few characters you'll regularly talk to and interact with by virtue of their exploration focus. Here though, because these characters are always with you, there's bandwidth there to properly drive not just a compelling main story, but side stories of their own. One seeks revenge against his creator for condemning him to a life of eternal battle against his own for mere entertainment. Another grows tired of seeing his fellow machines needlessly disposed of and wants to cease their production. The decision to make the protagonist a young girl who requires the support of others to succeed, that these characters are inextricably linked to your Metroidvania toolkit, and that all this makes you really look forward to beating the next boss, not just for their power, but for their stories and their companionship. I mean, that's just genius. For fans of Ender Lilies, this is probably nothing new from what I understand. For me though, as someone in the dark, I was really awestruck by that perfect marriage of narrative and gameplay, and I can't wait to experience it again when I go back to their previous game. On that point, you can absolutely enjoy Ender Magnolia if you haven't played Ender Lilies, as I just did. It's quite standalone in that while this takes place in the same world as Ender Lilies, it's set in an entirely different kingdom, acting as a blank slate from which to get you up to speed. It also trades the medieval Souls-like dark fantasy of Ender Lilies for a more industrial Magitech setting. As such, the story deals in appropriately heavy themes that feel quite relevant to today. It touches on things like pollution, animal experimentation, human trafficking, and the lengths that civilization will go to sustain our technology and protect our standard of living. I really appreciated the subtlety through which it surfaces these topics though. It's never so overt that it detracts from the excellent main narrative, but these hints at broader issues do a lot to elevate the world building. Because yeah, that world building was one of my favorite parts of Ender Magnolia, and while some of that is done via the main plot with its cinematic flashbacks and character dialogue, I was far more impressed by how effectively it's done through other means, like pickups, art, and music. In most games with lore entries and notes to collect, I'm typically skimming through, as often they're inconsequential and only exist to make the world feel a little more lived in. Here in Ender Magnolia though, I found myself committed to reading through every single one in detail, as they all meaningfully expand your knowledge of this unfamiliar world. Like, you get the general gist of what's happening without them, but only by reading these clues will you truly understand just how sick and twisted this land is. Magnolia makes these sorts of lore entries so intrinsically rewarding to find, as they make you feel like you're the first person here to connect the dots, and they consistently bolster the main plot. Likewise, the environments themselves have much to say about this world. Collapsed, rusting structures, corpses both organic and inorganic piled high, every texture having this layer of grunginess and grime, all sitting behind a constant smog. It speaks to a world that's only barely hospitable and barely worth saving if it weren't for the few survivors in the main town still clinging to the hope that you'll save them. The visuals probably aren't to everyone's taste, with its sort of dreary papercraft / diorama aesthetic, but it is undoubtedly distinctive, and it did really grow on me as I came upon the more vibrant scenery interspersed throughout. There's an especially wild looking zone later on that felt like you were exploring the veins of a living organism, but I won't spoil that here. And then there's the music of Magnolia, which is similarly evocative. Like Ender Lilies, it's all handled by a Japanese indie band simply known as Millie, and their delicate blend of piano, light strings, synth, and vocals make for an appropriately melancholic soundtrack. Of note is that the boss fights don't have the kind of grandiose, blood-pumping music you'd expect. They're equally understated, which can feel a little underwhelming at times, but otherwise it perfectly reflects the context. They aren't supposed to be these hype, epic duels fueled by adrenaline. They're meant to be, well, sad. They're against discarded, tortured machines driven to madness, who Lilac only intends to cleanse once they're too exhausted to continue fighting. So that's how all these elements elevate the world and narrative. But how does Magnolia actually play? The answer is exceptionally well. I don't think it quite comes across when just watching gameplay, but yeah, take my word for it, the very first thing I wrote in my notes was, damn, this is smooth. It's a result of a combination of things. The fact that Lilac feels super snappy to control, all her attacks weave together seamlessly, the hit stop on your attacks feels great, parry windows and iframes on dodges are very generous, enemy telegraphs are clear and concise, and all this is aided by the fact that there's very little visual noise. Some enemies have annoying multi-hit attacks that can feel a bit rough to counter, but outside of those rare occasions, you never feel cheated in combat or platforming scenarios. And yeah, like, this is intended to be a somewhat difficult game, but it's not grueling. To be honest, I struggled a lot more with games like Hollow Knight and Prince of Persia. You can tailor the difficulty how you like in the settings, but on the standard normal difficulty, I found the tuning felt perfectly calibrated for someone just doing some light exploration. Like, I never found the need to go out of my way to farm XP, currencies, or even hunt for upgrades. In fact, there's a refreshing lack of friction when compared to those more difficult Metroidvanias, on account of all the quality of life baked in here. A key one being that there is no punishment for death. You don't lose XP nor currency, checkpoints are very frequent outside of the last couple zones, and you can fast travel to them at any time. This means that you'll rarely ever be soft locked by the difficulty, as every rerun of an area just results in you getting stronger and stronger until you inevitably push through. It does wonders for exploration too, as you no longer have to wonder if that platforming puzzle is worth risking your time and progression. You can just go for it. What surprised me most though is how customizable the combat is. After the first few hours, I had unlocked a basic attack, a ranged attack, and a parry, and at that point I was like, cool, that's probably it, as most Metroidvanias tend to be rather simple in this regard. But then, as I went on to meet more characters that would join my cause, I'd go on to unlock like half a dozen more combat abilities, each with a couple unlockable variations. You've only got 3 combat ability slots, but you can mix and match them how you like, and where in Ender Lilies many of these had finite usage before you'd need to refill, here you've just got their cooldowns to manage. What's great is that they each lean into a specific niche. Do you want melee, ranged, multi-hits, or single damage spikes, status effects? So I found myself switching switching between all of them throughout my playthrough before landing on my preferred playstyle, but even that would demand some adjustment during the later bosses. All that is to say that the combat in Ender Magnolia is excellent. It certainly doesn't offer the same gnarly skill expression as something like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, with its input combos and time bending, but it does boast very tight fundamentals and affords a level of combat customization that is very rare within the Metroidvania genre, allowing you to build a playstyle of your very own. Arguably, the most important aspect of a Metroidvania, though, is the level design. While I think Animal Well is still the king in this regard with its remarkably inventive approach to exploration and puzzle solving, Ender Magnolia still does a splendid job stretching that traditional Metroidvania format to its limits. It starts out quite simple, as you'd expect. Explore until you run into some barrier that you clearly don't have the tools for, explore some other area until you get said tool, come back and continue on. That kind of backtracking can get tedious in a Metroidvania, but Ender Magnolia alleviates some of that frustration by having a detailed map that indicates which areas you haven't fully explored, and automatically tags the points that you're not able to access yet. Like the best in the genre, these traversal puzzles then gradually layer on the complexity in accordance with your capabilities, with the final chapters of the game demanding mastery over all your tools in combination, often requiring that you expand your puzzle-solving view to not just account for the single area you're in, but also spanning the areas surrounding it. What I found especially clever was how well that segmented level design was still able to reflect the zone's setting. For example, this early forest area was made to feel like a confusing, winding forest by having its paths connect in awkward, unexpected ways. This zone, with a classical Japanese influence, was loaded with zip lines and verticality to make you feel like you're navigating those tall, multi-storied castles. It's by no means a new concept for this genre, but creating this kind of level identity is the mark of a good one, and indeed, what a superb Metroidvania this is. So that's Ender Magnolia: Bloom in the Mists. It's about 20 to 25 hours to play through, it's available on all platforms, and is an especially perfect fit for the Steam Deck, as you might expect. I do encourage that you play Ender Lilies first before diving in. Again, it's not necessary, but I really wish I had, given how much context it adds to this world, and how nicely it ties into the game's true ending, which I would urge you to pursue. Very conveniently, if you have Amazon Prime, it's available for free right now over on Prime Gaming. So I really suggest you snatch that up while you can. Because yeah, this is a game, and I suspect once I finish Ender Lilies, a series that will forever be seared into my memory. Sure, its art and music don't quite match the caliber of Ori. Its combat isn't quite as deep and expressive as Prince of Persia. Its exploration and puzzle solving isn't quite as captivating as Animal Well. But it still does a stellar job at every one of those components, woven together with what I think is the best storytelling and world building for any Metroidvania I've played so far. It's incredibly well-rounded in that sense, and for that reason, it cements itself as not just one of my favorite Metroidvanias in recent years, but perhaps my favorite of all time. If you're a fan of this genre, I absolutely consider this a must-play. For me, in many ways, it's set the benchmark by which I will compare all future Metroidvanias against. And that is why I strongly recommend it.
It's never too late to make a switch. Look at me. A few years ago, I was chained to a desk doing corporate stuff. No disrespect to anyone who loves that, but it certainly wasn't making me happy. I've told this story before, but when I wanted to break into the games media business, no one would hire me, so I decided to make my own website that focused on game guides. The thing was, I had no idea how to build a website, so I had to spend a few $1,000 paying someone to build it for me, and the website was terrible, mind you. It wasn't the web designer's fault, it was entirely on me. My idea sucked. The point of my story is that back then, you had to pay someone thousands of dollars to build a website for your business idea, because that was pretty much the only way that a website could get made. Not so today, because thankfully we have Squarespace. Squarespace is the place to build almost any website you'll need. Want to sell handmade candles? You can build a website for that. Want to profile your art portfolio? You can build a website for that. Want to start writing gaming reviews and commentary to try to shoulder barge your way into the industry? You can build a website for that too. Squarespace's intuitive tools allow you to build professional looking websites in minutes, and their rich suite of e-commerce options allows you to promote and monetize your work so that you can begin making a living from it. In fact, Squarespace recently took things to a whole new level. Their all-new design intelligence framework leverages their 2 decades of experience in website creation to give you even more tools to shape the website of your dreams, helping you with things like copywriting, tone of voice, product descriptions, and even mailouts. So if you're looking for a sea change, then you're in luck, because not only is Squarespace free to get started with, but if you use offer code SKILLUP, you'll get 10% off your purchase of a domain name. Click the link below to get started. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.